Good evening, I'm Ed Henry with a special report tonight on the election of a brand new pope. The white smoke, as you know, has settled, and Christians around the world, including 1.4 billion Catholics, are now celebrating the election of the 267th pope, and it's a stunner. The first ever American pontiff, as you see, Cardinal Robert Prevost, a Vatican insider under the late Pope Francis, who spent many years as a missionary in Peru, is now assuming the name of Pope Leo XIV. Leo means lion in Latin, and he has said bishops need to be tough, not a little prince sitting in his kingdom, he told the Vatican News last year, but a church leader who is close to the people he serves, walks with them, and suffers with them. He is the quintessential American story. Born Robert Francis Prevost in Chicago on September 14, 1955, to parents Louis Marius Prevost and Mildred Martinez, with two older brothers. You can see the Empire State Building lit up tonight in white and gold to celebrate the first ever American Pope. This Holy Father's journey, a reflection really of the American dream. His dad, a U.S. Navy veteran who fought in World War II, worked as an educator while his mom, get this, was a librarian. Served as an altar boy at St. Mary of the Assumption Church on the south side of Chicago. Fellow classmates described him as the smartest person in the class, who seemed destined for a life in the church. And one of his brothers says he's a Chicago White Sox fan, while his mom rooted for the Cubs there in the Windy City. Prevost earned his bachelor's degree in math from Villanova University in Pennsylvania, went on to receive his diploma in theology from the Catholic Theological Union of Chicago. He studied canon law at the Pontifical St. Thomas Aquinas University in Rome and was ordained a priest in June of 1982. In 1985, he joined the Augustinian mission in Peru. He became part of the religious order inspired by St. Augustine. From 2001 to 2013, he was tapped as prior general of the Worldwide Order based in Rome, eventually returning to Peru after his elevation in 2014 to bishop. He led the Diocese of Chicago. It was there in Peru, becoming a Peruvian citizen actually in 2015. He now has dual citizenship, U.S. and Peru. Pope Francis selected him as the prefect of the Dicastery of Bishops in January 2023, and he was elevated to cardinal by Francis as well. Appears to now be following Francis's approach to modesty. Watch aficionados today spotted the new pope wearing a Wenger Military Ranger black dial watch. It's got a rubber strap and goes for about $115 on eBay tonight. Fluent in 5 languages, English, Spanish, Italian, French, and Portuguese. He's got the ability to read in Latin and German as well, and clearly his communication skills gave him an edge in that conclave. He's described as friendly, practical, and private, not one to particularly seek out the limelight, but is noted for his leadership skills and said to be a good listener. Prevost is a firm supporter of his predecessor's papacy, especially the late pontiff's commitment to social justice issues. He considers himself an amateur tennis player, and as I noted, his brother John says he loves baseball as well. After 2 days of deliberations and 4 rounds of voting, Robert Francis Prevost walked onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica there as the new leader of the Catholic Church, now and forever known as Pope Leo XIV, now stepping in to a very uncertain future. So we're going to break it down step by step tonight. Let's go first live to Vatican City right now, where our Rome correspondent Alex Salvi joins us on this historic day. Good evening, Alex. I know you share Chicago roots with this new pope. Good evening.
Yeah, Ed, it's great to be with you on this historic night. It's a little troubling that he's a Sox fan, but I'm going to look past that for the sake of this report. But it's really good to talk to you tonight about this development, because it was over 2 weeks ago where you were out here kickstarting the coverage of this landmark event that will change the face of the Catholic Church for the foreseeable future. And when we first came out here, there were names that were being floated. One was Cardinal Pietro Parolin. He was looked at as the front runner. There were other names that were being floated as well. But as this process moved along, you may remember, names started surfacing that weren't being initially talked about. One was Pier Battista Pizzaballa, the Italian cardinal who serves as the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem. But one name that continued to creep up as this process moved along was Robert Francis Prevost, now known as Pope Leo XIV. Now, both of those men in many ways share some similarities. They're both relatively young. Pizzaballa, 60 years old. Prevost, 69 years old. They both are very relatively silent, I'll say, when it comes to some of the more controversial issues that took place within the Catholic Church. So because of that, neither one of them had a reputation one way or the other, too far left, too far right, or anything like that. And that may have been the difference maker when it became Prevost surfacing as the new leader of the Catholic Church, the 69-year-old Chicago native spending the past 10 years in Peru and It was elevated by Francis to cardinal and some of the most powerful positions within the church, and closely aligns with him on many issues such as immigration and the environment. But there have also been moments where he showed more traditionalist leanings, oftentimes walking the line on LGBTQ issues, and in 2012 even arguing against the inclusion of gender theory in Peru's school curriculum. And it may be for that reason, Ed, that at least 89 cardinals threw their support behind him, possibly seeing him as a unifier tasked with addressing the church's most significant problems: skyrocketing debt, dwindling numbers, and divisions within the church. His surprise ascension to the papacy, just as unpredictable as the conclave that got him there, but how he will operate and how the church will run with him now leading it is still anyone's guess, Ed.
All right, Alex Salvi, a great correspondent and apparently a Chicago Cubs fan. Alex, thank you. So why did Pope Leo XIV pick that specific name? And into that important question, he's been reporting all week from Vatican City. Rob?
Thanks, Ed. Out here with Tom Williams, a Vatican expert. It's been covering the Vatican for the last 30 years, and Father Gerald Murray, St. Joseph's Church, New York City. Great to be with you both. I'd like to get your reaction, Tom, to the name Leo XIV. What does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, Leo XIII, very famously, is considered the father of modern Catholic social thought. He began that with a very, very important encyclical letter called Rerum Novarum, written in 1891, had to do with the rights of workers, and it was a very strong takedown of socialism, and also really built up the idea of the natural right to private property. So a lot of things that we consider very, very important, and popes after him referred back to that over and over again. The fact that he wanted to be seen as somebody associated with that name, I think is a very positive sign. We know that he is very favorable to a lot of Pope Francis's priorities and the direction he was taking the church, and he made that very clear, I think, in his opening address. But at the same time, he could have been Francis II, and he chose not to do that. And Leo XIV signals also a continuity with the church's tradition over the last 120 years.
That's a good point. He could have been Francis II, particularly if his intention was to be a Francis 2.0. Time will tell. This happened just hours ago. Father Murray, I'm wondering what you make of the name, but also just sort of the way he presented himself. He was in the full regalia. What does that signal to the faithful? And what does this appointment mean to conservatives who wanted the church to go in a more traditional direction?
Well, he's perhaps appealing to them by taking all of the traditional vestments that popes have worn up to Pope Francis and making use of them. And actually, when you see them on TV, they're really beautiful because they have the image of Saints Peter and Paul on the stole he was wearing. He said the traditional prayers beautifully and gave the blessing. He asked people to pray with him the Hail Mary, which they did in Italian, which is a beautiful sign that he entrusts his pontificate to the Mother of God. Yes, it remains to be seen whether he is going to continue the line of Pope Francis in the same way that Pope Francis did, or whether he'll modify it, take up some new initiatives. Certainly, there's been a lot of criticism of Pope Francis's approach over the last 12 years. So now's the time to take stock. Were any of those criticisms valid? Did any make a good point?
Were you surprised, Tom, that he mentioned, I know you've covered, this is your third conclave now, complete.
Yes, yeah.
Were you surprised that he mentioned his predecessor's name at least 3 times?
Yeah,
is that normal?
No, that's unusual. That's unusual. It's often that a new pope will thank the College of Cardinals that elected him, but to repeat 3 times this thanks to Pope Francis is not. But again, that's not definitive. It doesn't tell us, much more than the fact that he is very grateful that he was named a cardinal by Francis and he was appointed to his role prior to this in bishops. But I think that also. There's a lot to be unpacked here. There's a lot to be seen, and the grace of God is at work as well.
Absolutely.
And we can make our human predictions, and we see what we see, and we know a lot about his past, but things can change, and people can grow into their role. And again, the grace of God is not to be discounted.
Father Murray, many, we'll call them freshman cardinals, first-time electors from countries where you don't expect cardinals to be electing a new pope, and we've talked about that over the past week. Were they more easily swayed because they are essentially just arriving?
Well, I'm going to guess that gratitude to Pope Francis on the part of those who are new to the College of Cardinals was part of the calculation when they made in voting for someone else who had been named to the College of Cardinals by Pope Francis, and relatively recently. It's interesting because Cardinal Prevost was not well known in the world, certainly not well known in the United States, but as last year and a half in charge of bishops, naming new bishops, he would get to know people. But my guess is, and this will perhaps be subject to revision, is that those that Pope Francis appointed as an act of gratitude picked someone that Pope Francis had made a cardinal, rather than look to someone else who had been in college longer.
Did you ever think you'd hear chants of USA, USA in Vatican Square?
No, that was a bit
I'm
of
still
a
hearing them
surprise.
right now. You can hear it
And
right
it'll
now.
be interesting to see how much he wants to own his Americanism. When I heard his name floated over this past week, he was put forward as the least American of the Americans. Someone who, yes, he was born in Chicago, but lived most of his life, and his pastoral work was done in Peru, and someone who wouldn't have the idea of the ugly American look that some people would fear. At the same time, I would have really liked to hear him speak a little bit of English in that opening address.
Yep.
He spoke in Italian, and he chose to speak in Spanish.
And Latin.
And Latin, but just a little bit. Even God bless you in English would have done so much to recognize his native land.
Father, just as we try to, final thought, as we sort of try to have perspective in the immediate aftermath, how historic will this end up being?
Very historic. You know, the United States is the world dominant power in economics and military and culture, you could say. And now one of their sons, a boy from Chicago, is now the Pope of the Catholic Church. So it's a big, momentous event in the life of the Church. And, you know, it signals, I think, also the importance that the Catholic Church in the United States has to benefit the Church throughout the world. We send missionaries, we support good works, and now our Holy Father is one of us.
Yeah.
So it's a big move.
And you
big
think
moment.
about that Villanova V, which I'm now hearing stands for Vatican, in addition to Villanova. Tom Williams, Gerald Murray, thank you so much. It's been
You're
a pleasure
welcome.
being with you this week.
Thank
Ed,
you, Rob.
We'll send it back to you.
Rob, thank you. Great stuff coming up. Heading into the conclave, just about every Vatican insider all but dismissed the possibility of an American pope, though the National Catholic Reporter ran a story suggesting Cardinal Prevost could make history. Now he has. We brief you on his past and what it might tell us about the future of the Church. Coming up.
With you, I am a Christian, and for you, I am a bishop. So may we all walk together towards that, to the place that God has prepared for us. May we walk together, accompany each other.
Welcome back to our live special tonight. Obviously a monumental day around Vatican City as Cardinal Robert Prevost, originally from Chicago, has become the first ever American Pope. Today begins day one of the legacy of Pope Leo XIV. Let's welcome in the host of America Right Now, Tom Basile, who's been on the ground around Rome doing an outstanding job for us. And Tom, talk a little bit about the surprise and what we can expect maybe from Pope Leo XIV. We've heard he wanted to take the name because he wanted to follow the legacy of Pope Leo XIII. What do we need to know about him?
Well, you know, he was a surprise. It all happened a lot faster than I think a lot of people thought was going to happen. But it's a sign that he got those 89 votes, and so he checked a lot of boxes for the College of Cardinals, and clearly there was a lot of excitement. And like I said, you know, we were anticipating this was going to go a lot longer than 5 ballots. But his name had started to crop up as kind of a consensus candidate, and somebody who could put that voter coalition together within the college, and he actually did that. And you make a really important point, Ed, and that is he took the name Leo, and while we don't know a lot about him or a lot about his positions on specific sort of hot-button issues of the church, I think that the name does give us certainly a lot of insight into what is important with him. Pope Leo XIII wrote some of the social encyclicals that have guided the church now for more than 100 years that have to do with the interplay of labor and commerce. It was sort of an anti-socialist mantra that for the church, and so that is a pretty different kind of approach than what we saw from Pope Francis. Of course, Pope Leo XIV, being an American, is coming from a different place. He's got American DNA, and so I think that we're going to see some softer tones toward capitalism than perhaps that we saw during Francis's papacy.
But we also hear that Pope Leo XIII's legacy was about standing up for the poor and continuing a legacy of Catholic social justice. That can cut a couple of ways. Of course, all of us want to help the poor. But does that mean the Pope Francis style of helping the poor and the forgotten that he talked about that was much more liberal? Or is it about helping others in a traditional Catholicism that we've known for many, many decades?
Yeah, look, I think that it's probably a little bit of both. And I think what the cardinals were trying to do is to sort of strike a balance, because Pope Francis got a lot of praise for reaching out to the margins of society. And remember, Pope Leo XIV spent much of his career as a missionary in Peru. His diocese was not in the United States; it was in Peru, and dealing with people who were on the margins of society. So that kind of the charity of the church, the outreach of the church to the world, particularly our most vulnerable populations, that is going to be clearly a focus of his.
And is that the other reason why an American pope would be picked? Let's be frank, money, capitalism. A lot of the money that goes to the church comes from Americans, and that may have been a factor here.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Yeah, Ed, I think that while, again, we're still have to take kind of a wait and see approach to exactly how he's going to handle his papacy, I think that we would expect that he would have a friendlier relationship with the United States and with Catholics in the United States who have decreased their support for the Catholic Church and for the Vatican, which is right now running a $50 million deficit. So he's got a financial issue that he has to deal with, and maybe he's going to be looking to improve those relationships with folks back home because of the donations and because of the generosity of American Catholics traditionally to the Catholic Church. So I think that we're going to see, maybe not on the politics, maybe not on immigration, but I think that there seemed to be a bit of a contentious relationship, not just politically, but generally with America. I think that the first American Pope is going to try to mend some of those fences, and that'll help the Church's mission continue, and certainly help with some of the challenges that this new Pope faces here in Rome.
A lot of challenges the world is watching. Tom Basile, thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
All right, continuing the conversation right now, I'd like to welcome in our friend Mercedes Schlapp. She's, of course, senior fellow for the American Conservative Union. Always great to see you, Mercedes. And the question of the hour, we all know Trump 2.0 has been more effective in a number of ways than the first time around. What's your feeling as a Catholic now about what some might consider Francis 2.0, or might Pope Leo chart his own course now?
You know, I really have to say, Ed, I never thought that I would see an American Pope be elected during my lifetime. Right now, for Catholics across the globe, it is truly a moment of celebration. It is a moment of deep prayer to basically pray that the Holy Spirit fills the heart and give wisdom to Pope Leo XIV. And it is very significant that he took the name Leo, because Pope Leo XIII was a very strong pope, someone who introduced the prayer of Saint Michael the Archangel, very strong, powerful prayer, addressing the issue of basically spiritual warfare and going and making sure you're prepared for battle. So I find that by him taking the name of Pope Leo XIV, there's definitely a sense that I believe that he knows that he is carrying a huge burden, which is that of the fact that there is much conflict, much division in the world. And let's remember, I know that we view him as an American Pope, but when he as a pope now, he is universal, as the Catholic Church is universal. So he is not just serving the Americans. No, he is serving the
Right.
1.4 billion Catholics across the globe. And so I do think that he is going to chart his own path. He is not a Jesuit. The Jesuit, I think that was something, I don't think he's going to be very similar to Pope Francis. Now, while he was appointed by Pope Francis and had a close relationship with him, I do think he understands that there is a moment in time to continue to grow the church and heal the divisions that we have seen. And it doesn't mean that he's going to agree with everyone all the time. That is not his job.
That's right. And grow it around the globe, to your big picture point. But your earlier point is important as well. The pride and excitement I can hear in your voice and mannerisms and everything else about an American pope, which we never expected in our lifetimes. President Trump, your old boss, mentioned that earlier. Let's take a listen.
What greater honor could there be? And we were a little bit surprised, but very happy. It's just a great, absolutely great honor. To have the Pope from America, that's a great honor. That's a great honor.
I think back to Cardinal Doyle telling me once that when Pope Francis came to New York City, there were so many thousands lined up on Fifth Avenue. Pope Francis sort of joked, I thought they said Americans were not that religious. What might, when you mentioned the Holy Spirit before, what might this inspire in Americans now?
Well, I got to tell you, the one thing that you have to understand as well is that President Trump has basically brought faith back into the White House. And I think for a long period of time, Americans almost felt that they had to be quiet about their faith. There was definitely a sense that if you didn't agree with, what I think the left was trying to push on you, that you were a racist, a homophobe, like the list goes on and an anti-woman. I mean, the list went on. And I think with the ability to know that we have, the ability to have freedom of speech in this country, freedom of religion in this country, and it's just back, that you could just wear your faith on your sleeve and talk about it openly. And so I think having this American Pope understanding really what we stand for in America, which is truly, I think, a very blessed country, a country that I think gives opportunities to so many people from across the globe. And so I think the Pope, the now Pope Leo XIV, can bring that, bring his experiences to the rest of the globe, and obviously as representative and the leader of our church.
Absolutely. In the last 30 seconds we have, one of the things that surprised me about Pope Francis, he never went back to Buenos Aires as pontiff. As some said, he had disagreements with the political leaders, didn't want to get in the middle of that. Can you imagine Pope Leo going back to Chicago and having a hot dog or going to a baseball game? There'd be so much pride, no?
Well, I think that there is a role of the Pope being the people's Pope, and it does mean going into the poorest areas. It does mean meeting with political leaders as well. And I just think we're going to have to wait and see how this Pope is. What we do know, and what I have heard, is that he's viewed as a quiet leader, someone who was very critical in appointing the bishops of the church, not someone that you would say is like a Pope John Paul II, which was a very charismatic leader during that time. So we have to, as I think Tom Basile said, we have to wait and see. We have to give this Pope an opportunity to basically be who he is and share his message and his heart to the world. And, the one thing is that we know that there has been a revival in the Catholic Church, and there needs to continue to be, because at the end of the day, as we grow closer to God, that's when we can find real peace, not only within ourselves, but to help really deal with complicated issues like Christian persecution that's happening across the globe, and also deal with conflicts with other nations. How do you bring peace? And so he will be a critical figure, I believe, in helping to eliminate a lot of these divisions that we're seeing, and possibly work with political leaders to get there.
Absolutely. Some wise words tonight, of course, from Mercy Schlapp. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless, Ed. God bless.
Absolutely, to everybody around the world and watching tonight. A shrinking number of Catholics, though, in America right now attending weekly Mass. Will this new Pope inspire a new generation to get back in the pews? Our special coverage of Pope Leo's election continues right after this. Welcome back to our special live coverage tonight, probing exactly who is Pope Leo XIV. I'm Ed Henry. There has been a decline in mass attendance across the world, particularly in America. Only 23% of self-identified Catholics attend Mass weekly, down sharply, as you can see, from the 1950s. Maybe the first ever American pontiff will inspire a new generation to get back in the pews, not just here in the United States, but around the world. Let's check in with our friend, Father Patrick Flanagan. He is chair of the Department of Theology and Religious Studies at the great St. John's University in Queens, New York. Good evening, Father. I've spoken to you in the last few days. I know you were excited about all of this. Do you think it might light a fire in the hearts of other Americans and others around the world as well?
Absolutely, Ed. I think that we are seeing a rejuvenation, an excitement, a thrill. I had Mass this afternoon at 12:10 at St. Agnes Cathedral in Rockville Center. About 250 people were there, and the bells started going off when I was preaching, and I thought maybe it was someone was calling me to step off the pulpit. Then I said to myself, I wonder if the Pope has been elected. I asked the people of God, I said, we have a new Pope, and some lady screamed out, we do have a new Pope. And everyone started clapping and rejoicing. And it's a great moment in our history. Not only do we have a new Pope, but that we have a Pope in America. And it's an Olympic moment, I find.
Yes, absolutely. And now Pew Research has found that the decline of Christianity in America has slowed down a bit, maybe leveling off. Some attribute that, as we were just talking to Mercedes Schlapp, to President Trump talking openly about his faith. I wonder what you think and what you've learned about this new Pope, and maybe whether he has a unique opportunity to pick up the baton and sort of run with it right now.
And I always say that initial steps are indicative of who a person is going to be. So I would like to just highlight three things that I saw at this welcome ceremony today to Pope Leo XIV. First, he walked out and he was wearing what is called the mozzetta, that red cape that goes around his neck, and he was wearing a stole. Now you remember that when Pope Francis walked out, Pope Francis chose to eschew those vestures and for simplicity. This guy is pretty much saying, I'm a man of tradition, I'm a man of history, I'm a man connected to previous popes. And there's something beautiful about that. The second piece is his choice of name, Leo. We think about Leo, we think about the first Leo, Leo the Great, St. Leo the Great. Extraordinary man who lived around the time of St. Augustine of Hippo, the founder of his own religious community. And St. Leo the Great fought off many detractors and folks who were trying to take the Catholic Church down. Followed by his immediate predecessor, Leo XIII, who was very much like a pastoral Francis, very much engaged with those people who are struggling with the negative effects of the Industrial Revolution and trying to help them restore the dignity and be more mindful of the common good. So I think what we're going to see in Pope Leo XIV is a man who's a deep man of faith, a global statesman, and someone who's well connected to his, what you call it, pastoral practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Last thing, I remember growing up Catholic, and you always kind of, maybe rightly or wrongly, thought the Pope was this distant figure. Maybe it got a little closer with Pope John Paul II reaching out. Pope Francis, there's positives, there's negatives. People will debate in the years ahead. But he definitely talked about wanting to get out with the people, and he wanted to be a shepherd. He had that saying about, you want to smell like the sheep. He didn't just want to preach behind a pulpit. I'm struck by the fact that this Pope gave an interview last year to the Vatican's official news site, and he said that the bishop is not supposed to be, quote, a little prince sitting in his kingdom. Rather, he's called authentically to be humble, to be close to the people he serves, to walk with them, to suffer with them. What do you think that means? What does that tell us about him?
So he had two major positions. One, he was the provincial and the superior general of his order, the Augustinians. And then he was also the apostolic administrator and bishop of a diocese in Peru. In both those instances, whether he was walking with his brother Augustinians or whether he was walking with the poorest people of Peru, he was always close to the people. So one of the things I'm hearing from my Augustinian friends is that this man is a very quiet force, but he's a very intimate force, and he's very much of a beautiful man that seeks intimacy with people and realizes that encourages people to build bridges, as he said, that bring about peace, and also be a person who is concerned about the common good and human dignity.
Yeah, absolutely. Some great insight tonight. Father Flanagan, we appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
And it's always a pleasure.
Always great to talk to you. Coming up, we have a lot more coverage live tonight on who exactly is Pope Leo XIV. What does he believe? What can we expect in the days, weeks, years ahead? Stay with us. Welcome back to our special report. I'm Ed Henry as we continue to break down this historic day for not just the Catholic Church, but really American history, the first ever American Pope. We wonder what the next phase for the Church will be under Pope Leo XIV. Is joining us now as the host of Saturday Agenda, our friend Rob Astorino. And Rob, we were together there around Vatican City covering the funeral of Pope Francis. Now as we look ahead, I remember you handicapping everyone and getting ready for the conclave, and the National Catholic Reporter had a story saying, could this be the Cardinal who makes history as the first American Pope? But not a lot of people were expecting this. Were you?
I thought if it were going to be an American, he would be the prototype. He would be the guy, but I didn't think it would be him, and I didn't think they'd go with an American. They were never going to pick, like, you know, an archbishop, a cardinal archbishop. But he really had a lot. I mean, he checks a lot of boxes for them, right? He's a Vatican guy. You know, he knows the bureaucracy, knows how the government works here, if you will, how the church proceeds. He was all around the world as a missionary, but also appointed bishops for Pope Francis. He knows obviously how the things work here, and he's sort of an inside guy, right? So that, and then he's I don't want to say he's Francis the sequel. I don't think so. I think he will go down some of those paths, but in a different way. And I think he might be a surprise later on. Obviously, it's going to be 20 years before we get the final answer on him, at least maybe. Right. But I think people are going to be pleasantly surprised. I don't think liberals are going to be happy in the end, and I don't think conservatives are going to be overly happy. I think he's going to be more towards the middle. I really do.
So what do we need to know then about the Augustinian order? Because so many people have picked through the legacy of Pope Francis as a Jesuit and felt he was far too liberal. That's the estimation of some. I remember trying to be a good Catholic boy at Siena College and reading City of God and learning about St. Augustine and his principles of original sin. He attended Pope Leo Villanova University, where that order is front and center. What do we need to know about this order? Just like we learned about Jesuits from Pope Francis, what might we need to know about St. Augustine?
Well, I mean, look, they're great thinkers, they're doers. And really, he put his life work into being a missionary, an Augustinian. He went into the fields. He helped the poor. You know, they're not to be forgotten. And so the reason why he took Pope Leo, you know, extending from the 13th to the 14th, is because of what Leo did. It was really more world outreach. It was getting down into the streets. It was making sure the workers, you know, that's what he wrote about, social justice. You know, I think you're going to see that, and you're going to see more of it. That's where the Americanism will come out in him, right? I think a little more, hopefully more plain talk, but not the chaos that we saw over the last pontificate, in that it was confusion. What did Francis mean? I don't think you're going to see that. I think Prevost is going to be more deliberative. Because he worked here so long, he understands that, and I think he saw the good of Francis, but also some of the mess that Francis left.
Well, speaking of a mess in the last minute we have, it's one thing to say, look, I'm going to get out there like a shepherd, as Pope Francis did, and be with the poor and the forgotten. That fits right into the Catholic idea. But then if that extends to, quote unquote, migrants, and we're not for cracking down on illegal immigration, and you see that as a cardinal, Pope Leo just retweeted a couple of weeks ago this post attacking President Trump and President Bukele of El Salvador on this issue. What might that tell us?
Well, I think it's going to tell you that that's the part of the Francis papacy that you're going to see continued. I think when you're working in the hills with the poor in Peru for so long, that obviously brings the perspective, right? I mean, he's a dual citizen. He's an American and a Peruvian. So that's his worldview. You're going to see that. And not that there's anything wrong with that, by the way. And even with Francis, there was a kind of misconception that he drifted away from dogma. He was pro-abortion. That was the nonsense from the media. He didn't, and neither will he. But what they concentrate on, I think, is going to be important. Is this going to be climate change? Is it going to be open borders and that kind of stuff? I don't think it's going to be as much as it was with Francis. I just don't. I think that was an important part of the discussions on why he got elected.
All right. Well, Rob Astorino, nobody knows more about picking a pope or picking a good bottle of red wine in Rome either. Rob Astorino, we spent some good time over there. We appreciate your reporting tonight. Joining us now for more is the Executive Director of the Catholic Action League of Massachusetts, CJ Doyle. CJ, always great to see you. Like a lot of Vatican watchers, you thought the next pope was likely to be an Italian. What do you think about it being an American? What do you think happened inside that conclave?
Well, of course, Italians are about 17 members now of 133 electors. And when they realized they were kind of losing power, they elected an Italian from Argentina the last time. And we saw as a prominent papabile an Italian from the Middle East, Cardinal Pizzaballa, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem. But I think this is also an indication they've elected an American, but he's an American that probably identifies more with the third world than with the first world. He spent 10 years in Peru as a seminary rector. He spent 9 years, another 9 years as a bishop. He was a missionary before that. So he doesn't have the normal profile you would see of an American prelate. I think this is going to be a very interesting pontificate. A number of people have pointed out that he took the name Leo. Now, Pope Leo was not only a very orthodox pope in faith and morals, but Pope Leo XIII was the architect, really, of modern Catholic teaching on social justice. He came up with a marvelous encyclical called Rerum Novarum, which was the first encyclical that really supported the rights of working people and the rights of organized labor. And in the 1880s in capitalist countries like the United States, trade unions were considered a very controversial thing. They were considered socialistic or communistic. So perhaps taking the name Leo indicates that we'll have somebody that will be orthodox in faith and morals, but will also support social justice.
Yeah, absolutely. CJ Doyle, real quick, what about the fact that he's spoken out against gender ideology and against homosexuality? Might it show a shift in cultural issues away from where Francis was, real quick?
Yeah, again, he's from the third world where people are not invested in these progressive causes. He decried the homosexual lifestyle. He said Hollywood and the media and the entertainment industry are doing too much to present a favorable view of alternative families. So this is a guy who is probably not in tune with Francis on some of these issues. He'll be in tune with Francis on migration. He'll be in tune with Francis on climate change and on synodality. But I think on some moral issues like that, he'll tend more in the Orthodox direction.
Yeah. Got it. Some old-time religion. CJ Doyle, thank you for your insights tonight.
Thank you.
Coming up, all right, we finally reached the big question. What do Americans think about this new pope? We hit the streets of New York to find out and what the faithful around the historic St. Patrick's Cathedral are thinking about a pope from the good old USA right after this. Pope Leo XIV, now officially the 267th Pope, a remarkable moment, not just in Vatican City, of course, but in churches and communities all around this great country. Our own Jon Glasgow is live tonight outside St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, checking in with the faithful there. John, good evening. What are you hearing?
Yeah, good evening to you. Great to be with you, Ed. And you know what? This church is one of the largest Catholic churches in the United States, and this was a buzz of activity here today once the Pope was announced. And once it was learned that it was an American-born Pope, well, there was a lot of buzz around here. But the question is, what will this Pope bring to Catholics in the United States? Watch.
Coming here to St. Patrick's to give thanks. And as a Catholic, I'm very, very happy. You know, it's great for the church, for the global, the universal church.
I'm really glad to see that there is an American, but I am very surprised. I really thought they were going Italian. I'm delighted. I'm grateful to see that someone has been elected that has been trusted to the cardinals who are in charge of voting. And it'll be wonderful to see what sort of legacy he will have on his own, but also what he will bring to the table.
Well, I am very enthusiastic and grateful to God, so I think it's amazing. We should all be happy.
What a surprise it was an American. Very
interesting because I thought he was kind of low on the list.
I was rooting for the Pope, for the Cardinal from Jerusalem. Don't ask me exactly why. I read about his profile. I liked his behavior 2 years ago during the hostage crisis.
So the announcement brought out a lot of people from other faiths as well to the St. Patrick's Cathedral here. But also Cardinal Timothy Dolan leads this church, and he was part of that selection of a candidate. So it'll be interesting to see what message he brings back here as well. But certainly a lot of enthusiasm here in New York City. A lot of people from all over the world came here to pray for the new Pope as well. Ed?
That's right. John, thank you for that great report. The excitement, as you can hear, it all started with that white smoke billowing over the Sistine Chapel. Celebrations and cheering immediately followed in St. Peter's Square, a truly electric moment. For more, let's get out to my colleague Rob Finnerty. He's at the Vatican.
Sometimes you have to judge a book by its cover. And when he stepped out onto the balcony, he looked like a pope to me.
Yes, as somebody recently said, he looks popish. He which is a bit silly, I suppose. But I really do believe it's not just superficial. I think it's important. I think it's a choice. He made the choice to put those vestments on, whereas Pope Francis made the choice not to put those vestments on. So I do think there's some significance to that.
Question for both of you, final thought, but did you ever think that you would live to see a pope from the United States? I did not.
I did not. In fact, I remember talking about this years ago with priests and said, no, there'll never be an American Pope. You know, they say the CIA was running the church kind of thing. So I don't think that's not the case. Absolutely not the case. But, you know, he is a man of both Americas. And that's something we have to keep in mind. He's a Peruvian citizen in addition to being a U.S. citizen. So I think what we're looking at here is, you know, the good influence that missionaries have had from the United States in Latin America. And now he'll bring that influence to the whole world.
Father Kiely?
And I'm sure the Peruvians are saying, we've got our first Pope.
Our first Peruvian Pope. Gentlemen, a pleasure covering this with you today, something I'll remember forever. Father Kiely, Father Murray, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you very much, Rob.